Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the What's Really Going On podcast, your favorite podcast where we discuss the intersection of politics and culture. Before we introduce our very special guest, be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts at WRGO Pod. That includes Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Be sure to like, listen, and subscribe, not only wherever you listen to podcasts, but on YouTube, where you can watch our special videos in full, including our wrap ups of the recent and more shocking Supreme Court decisions that came out this week. As I mentioned, we have a very special guest joining us today. We are honored and privileged to have Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr. on today. He is an author, educator, intellectual. He serves as the James S. McDonald Distinguished University Professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, known for his, I'll say in a good way, his incisive political commentary on platforms like MS Now and his amazing Substack, A Native Son. But it also includes his scholarship on race and democracy. He is the author, including works such as Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul, Begin Again, which is right here, one of my favorite books that I have ever read. That's on James Baldwin's America and its urgent lessons for our own. We Are the Leaders We Have Been Looking For. And most recently, his new book that came out on May 26th, the day after my birthday, America, USA, How Race Shadows the Nation's Anniversary, which is available wherever you listen or purchase books. Dr. Glad, we are honored to have you on today. How are you?
Oh man, I'm blessed. I'm excited to chop it up with you. I appreciate you.
Well, we can begin. Like we said, you've been
Sure.
one of the country's most unafraid public intellectuals and speakers. But before the TV appearances, before Princeton, before the books, what early experiences would you say have shaped the career that you've been trying to spend in finding answers to questions?
Early experiences. Well, I think, obviously the way in which I was raised,
Hmm.
uh, the way in which my father and my mother instilled certain values, and then of course how that got crystallized and shaped at Morehouse. And so, that HBCU experience was so critical to beginning to understand what it meant to think of oneself as a race man, to kind of think about the notion or the nature of what vocation entailed. And so, my early formation in Mississippi, and then Morehouse, and then, of course, the last experience, of course, or the last feat, I would say would be being trained by Cornel West. He was my dissertation advisor. So you got these three
Yeah.
stages in my life that really had a significant impact on how I orient myself to the public and to the subject of American politics and race. Yeah.
Yeah, well, as you're speaking to two Howard alums, you are certainly speaking our language in full. Um, One thing that I think we were particularly focused on and is just the concept of think of Mississippi as a state. I think it's often forgotten when
Mhm.
you talk about the American South, but it doesn't, it dawns on us that it's produced an extraordinary tradition of Black writers and thinkers that goes very under the radar, including yourself, like Ida B. Wells, Jasmine Ward, Kiesi Lema, Natasha Treshway. There's something distinct about kind of the bluntness that I think that you all write about both America and trauma specifically. What
Mhm.
about Mississippi do you think shapes how you all confront these really difficult subjects with kind of a very clear eye? What do you think is it about Moss Point or these other places that you grew up?
I think at the heart of Mississippi is the heart of the country. It's the contradictions. I mean, Mississippi is so beautiful. The landscape is beautiful and it's so dangerous at the same time. I grew up in a place where you could have the beauty of the blooms on magnolia trees, and you can have snakes that'll chase you down the street.
Hmm.
Right. So it's that combination, that contradiction. Mississippi is a metaphor for America. There's a reason why not only are we talking about Black writers, we're talking about the blues, we're talking about literature, that state has been such an incubator because we're kind of grappling on the front lines with the contradictions of the country. And if you survive Mississippi, right? And I'm not just saying get out of it. I'm talking about if you survive it and and the wounds don't overwhelm, then you have something to say. And whether that's on, with the blues scale, or whether it's with your pen, or whether it's with your voice, you have something to say to the country. And I tell this story in my new book, although I wrote it in Democracy in Black. My dad was the second African American hired in the post office in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And I'm from the water. I literally grew up about an hour and 45 minutes or hour and a half away from New Orleans. So I could walk to the Gulf of Mexico. The name of my town is Moss Point, the river city. We got bayous running all throughout the city, right? Or the town. I don't know if it's a city. But he moved us from one side of town to the other, you know. And I was playing with my Tonka truck and with my new white friend. And his daddy came out and he said, "Stop playing with that N word." And so I had to grab my truck because America was telling me what it thought of me. And then I went inside, and then my parents had to get to work to keep me from believing what the world had just said about me. I didn't find out till I was about 50 something years old when I was telling my dad this story, when I was in my early 50s. And my dad said, "Yeah, I remember that. And then I've doubled back behind you, and I hit that man in the chest with the butt of my 38." I said, "That's why they moved?" He said, "I don't know. I just know I knew he wasn't gonna F with you no more." Right. So there's this sense
Yeah.
of my formation that my dad was this Vietnam vet who didn't suffer racism easily. You know, people knew he was the crazy one, even though he was a thug who made good. They knew he was the one that you could not, speak out the side of your neck, as we would say.
I'm glad you speak about the rich culture of Mississippi, and I can maybe relate because I'm from the South, not that Southern. I'm from Georgia. And you speak about race, religion, democracy across your career. Do you think there's one central point you've been trying to answer?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure this place out. How do you square? America to me is a riddle to try to make sense of. This idea of democracy, of liberty and freedom and equality on the one hand, and the reality of Black life on the other. Right? Trying to make sense of who we take ourselves to be. So I'm obsessed with the interrelationship between race and democracy in this place. I'm obsessed with the question of identity, history, and agency. Who do we take ourselves to be? How does history shape the answer to that question? And how do we act in a world that constrains, that impacts and impinges on how we understand ourselves and that past? So I'm always preoccupied with the questions of history, identity, and agency in light of this issue of race and democracy in the country. And I do so from the vantage point of being a Black Southern writer from the coast. They're different. Imani Perry wrote a wonderful book entitled South to America. And, she's making the argument in that book that the South is the beating heart of the country, right? But she says that there are different parts of the South. Washington, D.C. isn't Mississippi,
No.
right? The Black Belt is distinctive, which is not West Virginia. It's not North Carolina. It's not certain parts of Texas, right? So to understand how differentiated that region is, at the same time, to understand its centrality to the country's imagination. Malcolm X would say, as long as you're south of the Canadian border, you're in the South. And what he means by that is not that everyone's Southern. What he means by that is the sensibility of the South is not locatable only in that region. It's the sensibility of the nation as such. So that's been my obsession, man, since the moment I can remember remembering, is trying to figure out my place in this place, given the history and the complexity of it all.
That's a very nuanced thought. And like, do you find yourself maybe sometime anxious or like I remember when I graduated or not graduated, my first year at Howard, like that first semester, I came home and I felt like I told my mom a slave off the plantation attempting to save everybody. Do you find yourself getting like anxious or attempting to put out fires with all of this like intellectual curiosity that you have? And like, where does it come from?
Man, wow. Yeah, I left home when I was 16 to go to college.
Hmm.
So Morehouse had that early admit program that Dr. King was part of and Maynard Jackson was a part of. And so I basically ran away from home. I was trying to get away from my daddy. My sister was the first African American valedictorian of our high school in Moss Point, and and man, I left home at 80 in 85. So this is 84, 1984, and the school district refused to let her be the first African American valedictorian. So they had a white valedictorian alongside of her. This is 1984,
Mhm.
right? So she went to Spelman, and I just followed her. And my God, what Spellman? Oh, anyway, but I followed her. I followed her, uh, uh,
Don't I know it?
and the thing that happened to me, Doc, was I found a language to understand my anger and my father's rage.
Mm,
I cut my political teeth in the Black nationalist tradition. We started the Organization for African American Consciousness, which was a reading group, and we were reading Sheikh Anta Diop and George James and Walter Rodney and all of these folks, right? So when I came home, I was this Black nationalist. Right. And so I'm talking about freeing Black people, and my folks are looking at me like, what the hell's wrong with you? And then my great grandmother, who spent her life as a domestic in the kitchens of white folks on the coast of Mississippi. She bought the stove that made the best pinto beans on the planet with
Mm.
dimes, the refrigerator that held the most delicious Kool-Aid you can perfectly balanced Kool-Aid you can imagine. She bought with dimes. And she said to me, I was talking all this Black nationalist stuff at the time, and she said, you need this, white folks ain't gonna change, right? If you keep dwelling on this, it's going to eat you up.
Mm.
Right. So she was trying to show me how a certain kind of sensibility that informed the Black nationalist tradition was already in the solution, was already in the air that I breathed growing up. But there was a way in which that she was trying to tell me to obsess with what these folk are doing is to lose sight of what you were called to do. So, in some ways, I found myself. You remember that moment in Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk and Of the Coming of John? It's that short story. And Du Bois talks about the country boy who laughed and made all the white folk comfortable. He goes off to college. He comes back. He tries to save the community by introducing X, Y, and Z. The community looks at him like he's crazy because he's preaching and they don't understand that gospel. The preacher gets up, snatches the Bible, starts preaching what everybody wants to hear, and it becomes a lynching parable. It becomes a lynching parable, right? Because this man who finds himself betwixt and between,
yeah.
right, can't seem to find his footing. And I understand that intimately because I go home and I get called Dr. Bebe still because that's my nickname.
I love all of this, and I think it's so amazing that we're having this conversation on July 1st. America is on the verge of marking its 250th anniversary. In your book, as we mentioned earlier, America USA: How Race Shadows the Nation's Anniversary, asks us to look at these celebrations in a different way. In light of everything else going on, especially as the nation is preparing and the administration and the president are preparing to celebrate this day, what inspired you to examine these anniversaries as a windows to understanding race and democracy?
Because at every turn, with every milestone anniversary, the nation has to tell a story of itself.
Yeah.
And here we are in this moment. I mean, what are we going to celebrate come July 4th? They've gutted the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah.
They're redrawing districts to diminish Black political power. You see the court in TPS where you got parents, you got Haitian parents trying to figure out who's going to take care of their children if they get deported
Yeah.
because of the end of temporary protection status. You got you have Delaney Hall and immigration detention centers and ICE. What are we celebrating? And so what I wanted to do is, every present demands a past to account for it. Every now needs a history to tell itself a story of itself, right? So I'm like looking at, okay, here we are in this moment, all hell's breaking loose, Trumpism, they've done this mess again. Let me look at the other milestone anniversaries. 1876, Reconstruction's collapsing. The South is in full rebellion still. You have political coups all over the place, right? Between the end of Reconstruction and the turn of the 20th century, 53,000 black people are murdered. So 1876 is the centennial, the first national ritual after the Civil War that left 600,000 plus dead on land and sea. And what does the nation do? It disremembers, as Toni Morrison says. It tells a story of itself that disappears black people.
And 1 year later, the Compromise of 1877 happens.
Boom. You see? And then in 1926, we talk about the night, that's the sesquicentennial, the 150th. It was corrupt. It was not a success. But we talk about the 1920s as the Roaring Twenties. But that's the decade of the Klan. The Klan was reborn in 1915, right? Its primary purpose was to talk about the native, it was a nativist, viciously nativist organization and racist organization between 1880 and 1924. Over 20 plus million white folk, people who would become white, migrated to the United States. And the Klan was deeply suspicious of these people who were going to become white, coming from S-hole European countries, those swarthy Italians, those Irish papists who had loyalty to the Pope, those Jews. They didn't want them. They wanted Nordic white folk, Nordic people to come. Sounds familiar, right? And their seminal piece of legislation, the Klan claimed as its achievement, was the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act of 1924. Which set the quotas that defined the nation as a white republic. This is what the Immigration Act of 1965 overturned, that these people want to overturn. The folk today who are arguing for immigration policy, they want to go back to the regime of 1924, which was created by the Klan. In 1926, y'all, on the grounds of the celebration for the 150th anniversary, the Klan was approved to hold its annual convention. So they were going to celebrate the flag and burn a cross at the same time. Come on. So what I do in the book is I look at each of these celebrations, 1876, 1926, 1976, and show how race confounds the way in which the country tells itself a story. Because America, at the end of the day, it's not just us. As Du Bois said, America suffers from a kind of double consciousness. It thinks of itself as a beacon of freedom and as a white republic. And you can't hold those two things together at once without madness, without contradiction. So that's the book.
I promise you, readers, Dr. Glaude did not have our questions in advance because that kind of ties directly into the next thing. One of the themes of the book is that, to your point, that our national celebrations tell a triumphant story and racial injustice often remains outside the frame, outside the scope, outside the text. Why do you think that Americans have such a difficult time holding both of those truths at the same time? I think you can certainly have one of the accomplishments with the reality of the other, and that this thing called freedom is not shared equally. But why do you think people can't grasp those two things as one, which you present that they are? You can't have one without the other.
I think at the end of the day, the country, at least some people in the country, refuse to relinquish the idea that being white accords them a special kind of standing. The country can't believe its actual history because then it will reveal the lie that it has told itself since its founding. That's why they can't believe us, you see. We can tell them all along, this is the way the police is treating us. This is the way X, Y, and Z is happening. This is what's happening in the workplace. This is what's happening. We can scream all day that the way in which they've organized this society, right, disadvantages us, and they won't believe us, because to believe us means that they have to believe something different about themselves, right? So the country is yet to discover who and what it is, precisely because it has to retreat into fantasy and illusion in order to secure its innocence. And so one of the reasons why, to answer the question more directly, the country refuses to grow up. It's adolescent at its core.
Look at this president.
Yeah, and exactly, Doc. And he's just the latest adolescent.
Yeah.
I mean, you could draw a straight line from Ronald Reagan to him.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and what is at the heart? I mean, America is like Never Never Land at times, right? And what is at the heart of Never Never Land? Nobody wants to grow up and nobody wants to be responsible. Right. No one wants to be held to account. And so this is what happens when you come from a place like Mississippi, right? I come from a blues soaked state. And that doesn't mean, right, what that doesn't mean that somehow we aren't touched by the American fantasy, but it means that we don't deal with reality as if it's always already good and decent. No, 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 no. Going back to where we started, it's complicated, it's beautiful and dark. BB King's Nobody Loves Me But My Mother, but she could be jiving too. Right. And so I'm asking for the country to be more mature, to grow the hell up, to understand the darkness of its past in order to release itself into a different kind of future. That's what I'm doing in the book. Yeah.
You're right. I do not love American, never. That's a very striking opening there, and kind of like you foreshadow with that answer you just provided, like the ideal of patriotism and what that looks like. I think one of the hardest truths you might suggest is like patriotism requires confronting one of what's hard to acknowledge. What does genuine reckoning look like to you?
Well, genuine reckoning involves not only remembering but confrontation. So let me bring it home down to the ground. So I said that I ran away from home, in effect, running away from my father, and I just ran to go to college, right? I can remember my father could look at me and I would start crying. I could cry. He scared the living daylights out of me. And he would say to me all the time, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to prepare you for the world that ain't friendly for you. And my discipline, my sense of courage, all of that has everything to do with the fear that he deposited in my gut, right? And so there's this sense, right, that he was trying to prepare me for this world that would not love me, that did not care for me. He had to give me the tools to survive it. So then the question becomes, well, I'm gonna get to the broader point. The question becomes then, right? Well, what are you doing? So how do I avoid repeating what he did to me to my child? So I can remember the wound. I can remember the moments when he hurt me the most. But if I don't confront those moments, then I'm going to end up duplicating them in the way in which I raise my child. It's not enough to remember it because you can remember something that bad happened to you. But if you don't confront it and understand how it moves you about, then you're going to end up duplicating it. And I did in crazy ways. Here I am, a Princeton professor, and my child, if he ever decided to write a memoir about his crazy daddy, I don't know what would happen. You know what I mean? So this is what I mean by the country, right? We have to not only remember our past, we have to confront it in order to be released from the ghosts that have us by the nape of the neck. Now, I wrote that sentence, Doc, because it's true. I didn't, the country didn't love me. I had to learn how to survive it. So the question becomes, why would you expect me to love it? And I think let me say it this way, put it this way. The expectation that we should love the country comes out from two places. One, that we should show gratitude, that all the things that we've achieved has been because of them, not because of the hard work, not because we're swimming upstream or against the headwinds. No, no. My life, my achievements is because somebody gave them to me, because I didn't earn them, because I don't have the merit, according to these folks. That's one thing. But the second thing is that they need us to love it just like they needed the slave to love being enslaved.
Hmm.
Think about the stereotypes of an Uncle Tom. Think about the stereotypes of how black folk were supposedly the docile slave who loved being, right, the property of white folk. Because in order to confront the reality, you're going to have to, again, confront yourself,
Hmm.
right? So we have to love the country because they don't want to answer the question, why don't we? Because if we answer the question honestly, why don't we? Then it throws it back to them. What kind of country have you created? What does it mean to ask me if I love the country in a moment when you're literally gutting, pulling out the entrails of the country that the civil rights movement helped build? Come on. So that's the origins of that first sentence. And I thought I had to say it in order to give other people permission to say it because I've heard it all my life.
Look, I'm glad you're just calling out Uncle Clarence up there on that bench because he clearly doesn't understand. And with that like thought, how do you teach your son or the next generation? How do you fundamentally kind of like confront some of what's going on in America where we see we're doing the redistricting, not putting our books in schools and not teaching our children our history? Do you think this is like reshaping America, or are we
Of
witnessing
course.
another chapter, or is this something we've experienced before?
It's both and. We're in a second lost cause. And usually when we go through these cycles, to use Gwendolyn Brooks's language, we're in the whip of the whirlwind right now, you know. And whenever we find ourselves in these cycles, our task has always been to get our babies to the other side. Whenever the fever dream spikes, we got to make sure we get our babies to the other side. And we do that. We have done it by way of Black institutional life. Folks. So institutions like Howard and Morehouse and Spelman and Tuskegee and the like, they've been important. Black churches, Black civil society has been critical, but all of those things have been weakened over the last decades or few decades or so. So we're in a very really dark place. But one of the things that we've always done is that we told our story in the face of people trying to disappear us. So even when they in the milestone anniversaries, when they don't want us to talk, when they don't want us to say anything, we tell our story. So what I've done in this moment, in this book, what I've sought to do is to speak back to the effort to disappear us. Now I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this, and I might get in a little trouble.
Not
I don't
here.
have I don't have much time on the national stage because baby boomers wouldn't get out the way.
Mm.
They just so my generation,
Yeah.
we couldn't, they stepped on us.
Mhm.
We couldn't get in. You still got 84-year-olds and 87-year-olds doing all of the so if I'm not going to do to y'all what was done to us, my task is to clear the underbrush in the little short time I have and then get out the way. To create the conditions under which you and your generation and the generation afterward can get to work to building the country that we want and desire. My task is a kind of a vestibule, a kind of let me or cleaning. Let me get in here and clean the underbrush so that y'all can come in and then I can move out the way, right? If we don't step on y'all like we were stepped on, right? So, in light of that description, I think what I'm trying to do with America USA is open up space with narrative, with story, so that the younger generation can have the historical resources, right, to intervene in this moment. As my colleague Imani Perry says, we don't want history to haunt us. We want to haunt history.
Mm.
We're gonna flip the script. We're gonna scour it for resources to imagine ourselves differently moving forward.
It's so beautiful how you just said that because like Black elitism has always played a part in this kind of push forth of Black progression. And I've always personally had the thought that after the 60s, where we gained a little bit, we kind of dropped the ball and they blinded our eyes. And I have a mentor that constantly says, "It's war, baby." And it reinforces that same thought that you just said. It's not a physical war, it's a psychological war, it's a historical war, it's a contextual war of us just kind of harboring and making sure we have freedoms in this country. What role do we play? You just kind of spoke toward, but like how I just kind of paraframed all of that. How does that forethought to you?
Yeah, look, I think all of us have lanes to occupy. We speak at a certain level of generality, and there are dangers in doing so. We don't want to lose sight of the complexity of our communities and hold certain assumptions about what we must be doing, what we should be doing, and the like. We have to understand that solidarities are made, they're not presupposed. We got to organize, we got to mobilize, we got to do the hard work close to the ground. And I think your generation and the younger generations, you guys got to bring your skill sets to bear. You know this digital game better than any of us. You know how to think in a much more supple way in light of the technological landscape. but you're also in a much more difficult position than we were. The neoliberalism, capitalism has penetrated all the way down. And so you can use these digital platforms just simply to promote your own individual brand. That folk can think about, a kind of protest that is simply a kind of performance of virtue because we want folk to see us a certain sort of way. So there's a way, I mean, it's always been the case, but it takes on a different form in light of the pace of the digital environment, these technological advances. So you got your skill set, but you also have your particular challenges. And we know that the data is very clear that the farther you're away from the civil rights movement, the less likely you are to identify with the Democratic Party. So you're charged with imagining a different kind of politics in this moment. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it over and over again, and now, the Democratic establishment is running around with his hair on fire because these folk y'all electing Brandon Scott, you're electing Mamdani, you're electing these all across the board. Something is happening that isn't reducible to traditional forms of democratic politics. So bring your skill set, bring the fullness of who you are. And then I want to say this, don't feel like you have to be, I think we have to show the requisite piety to the past. I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the 1960s. But it's really important for us not to lose our voice in imitation of the past. All right, nah. We don't need a duplication of the 1960s. We need you to bring your voice, your distinctive style to the struggle that this moment commands and demands of us, if that makes sense.
No, perfectly. And as we get ready to ask our final two questions before we get to our fun little rapid fire,
Sure.
as I said, Begin Again is one of my favorite books that I've ever read because I think as someone who has grown up reading Baldwin since high school, you present him in a different way. You both write about him as a writer, as a thinker, but also as a human. Um,
Mhm.
what do you think that he would make personally of this moment? And do you at least see similarities between yourself? Where I think in the book you write really eloquently about the personal toll of
Mhm.
kind of experiencing that moment where Baldwin is seeing his friends, his loved ones die in this movement, and he's kind of like the last one left from Lorraine Hansberry, Malcolm X, Martin Luther, like all these people he came with weren't there at the end of his road. Do you at least see similarities, not, outside of, the life and death of it all, but do you at least see similarities between your own academic and personal journey, or at least of the personal toll of fighting this good fight, even though it doesn't always necessarily feel good in the day?
Yeah, you know, yeah, I know, absolutely. I'm always hesitant to try to anticipate what Baldwin might think of the moment. I
Mhm.
can only talk about what I've learned from him.
Yeah.
And I had to write Begin Again because I saw all of these young black folk risk their lives for Black Lives Matter. And the country gave them Donald Trump in response.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, they were in the streets, they did all of this work, and we were supposed to be in this racial reckoning, and the response of the nation was Trump. And so I said, okay, now Baldwin is my walking partner. How did he deal with this? How did he deal with after the civil rights movement? They gave the country Reagan. Right? What did that mean for him? And so I turned to him as I always do for resources to kind of speak to my own sense of melancholy or my own sense of grief. And in this moment, sometimes, as Baldwin says in his last interview with Quincy Troop, you feel like a broken motor, saying the same thing over and over and over and over again. But he also told me that um, we don't have time for our elegant despair. Our task in these moments is to get our babies to the other side. That's our task. So I don't have time, even though some days I don't feel like getting up, some days I don't feel like running my mouth, and saying the things that I say, and doing the things that I do. But again, we got to get our babies to the other side. Um, I think at the end of the day, this line, when I say that the nation has to grow up, I'm channeling Jimmy in that moment, right? Um, because that uncle that's still walking around, spitting rhymes.
Yeah.
And he old, wearing long jeans and Jordans.
Talk about half of these folks in Atlanta.
But you see what I mean, though? They're walking around like they just refuse. Because one of the things about hip hop, and I was born on the cusp, but one of the things about hip hop is it demands adolescence. It keeps people from growing up
Talk about it.
in interesting sorts of ways. And when you refuse to grow up, you are on the cusp of becoming monstrous,
Mm.
right? And I think Baldwin um, taught me that. And so here we are in the 250th year of the country, and we're still waddling in adolescence.
And I love that you had mentioned music, and this will be the final question before we go to our rapid fire. But
Sure.
you often end each episode of A Native Son, which I listen to every Friday, by saying to hold your loved ones close, and you usually finish off with playing a song as you kind of finish off. It's a remarkably, I feel, for me personally, as someone who listens, it's a remarkably, I think, hopeful way to, I think, give your listeners and us collectively breathing space to conclude a conversation on difficult subjects. What role for you does music, friendship, family? I know you've gone through a lot with your mother in
Mhm.
recent years. Your son graduated from law school and stuff like that. So how do those relationships, music, the culture more broadly kind of give you the space to carry through? To your point, there are some days where you don't think about, where you don't want to do this work, but something gets you to the other side. Uh,
Yeah.
can you talk about those relationships that kind of drive
Oh
you forward?
man,
Because at least for
just
us, if I didn't have Henry, we'd be screaming at a wall all day.
oh
So
my God, punching it or punching it, right?
we have.
No, 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 absolutely, man. Going back to the sentence that Henry read, right? That I don't love abstractions, right? So the flag and the country, those are abstractions. I love people,
Hmm.
right? And I love people. My love is closer to the ground, right? And it's there that meaning is found. So, when I say pull your loved ones close, that's the armor that allows us to endure this place, to even flourish, right? And and then you understand love in these concentric circles, right? Ralph Ellison, the author of Invisible Man, says that democracy at its best, is a disinterested form of love. That I want for you, even though I don't know you, I want for you all that is good for you. I don't want you to go broke because you're sick. I don't want you to not be able to educate your child. I want the best for you, even though and that's the best of our tradition. That's what I learned from my great grandmama on the coast of Mississippi. And then the music, man. Again, I still remember the Al Green White Album and Run DMC and
Yeah,
Rapper's Delight. I'm right in that generation,
right
right?
in the middle.
But music for me, right, pre- predates the word. Sound predates language,
Hmm.
right? So that Cornel West used to give this lecture. He said, first there was the moan, Moan. Then there was the mourn, Mourn, the moaning, Moaning, the mourning, Mourning. And those two set the stage for the morning, Morning. Right? So that sound is where possibility is found. That blue note, that blues scale with the most unstable chord you can imagine is at its heart, gives voice to what it means to be a human being between wound and tomb. I mean, between a womb and tomb. So for me, Doc, man, music is a bomb. Let me get down. I can go from listening to reggae music to listening to jazz to listening to some cold Bobby Blue blend, right? To some soulful hip hop that my son is introducing me to. That isn't kind of this stuff that I can't quite make sense of.
That noise.
Yeah, you know that I can't quite make. So I love music so much, Doc. Just real quick, because I know we got to get to the rapid round.
Mhm.
I commissioned a piece for the book. So I woke up in the middle of the night. Well, it was middle of the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, I want music in my book. So I called the classical composer, Joel Thompson. I texted him and said, I want to use some of your music in my book as the epigraph. So each chapter in America USA has bars of music as his epigraph, but it's not separate music, it's one composition. I asked him to write, in effect, I asked him to score the book.
Beautiful.
And so he created this piano concerto entitled And Blue that represents the thesis of the book. So if you go to the audio book, you can hear the music that is the argument of America USA. In my imagination, Doc, they're like this. It's interlocked.
That's beautiful. And with the rapid fire, what sound do you think defines this moment?
Take it, which sample?
What sound would you say defines this moment?
Shit, I don't know. It could be what sound? I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I was just about to go to George Clinton and P-Funk or something. Something that is, oh, maybe Coltrane sheets of sound,
Mm,
right?
that's a good
Maybe
one.
Coltrane sheets of sound,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
There's all of this stuff that's happening all at once.
Mhm.
Yeah, so Coltrane sheets of sound, right? That's it.
Yes. And if you weren't in academia, what would you be doing?
Smoking a woo on the corner. No, probably I'll probably be a preacher.
That's fair. I can see that.
I see that.
I can definitely see that. Do you have any comfort foods or routines?
Routines, going into my basement and reading a novel and drinking Irish whiskey. Comfort food, it varies, but I love my mama's gumbo.
Mm.
Mm. Do you have a particular Irish whiskey you like?
Oh, it varies. So my everyday Irish whiskey is a Jameson 12, but I like an Irish 15, a Redbreast 15, which is nice with
Well, you
with a good
say you're
cigar.
more matured in my taste. I'm learning the palates.
Hey, Doc, when you drink that stuff, you don't need but two. You don't need to drink a lot. And there's no sugar added, just some ice, if that.
Look, look.
If that.
What's one book everyone should read this summer?
Outside of
I
your
don't, oh my God, that's so unfair. What one book they should read this summer? Grab the the library edition of Baldwin's nonfiction, edited by Toni Morris.
love that.
Myself. What artist or album do you find yourself coming back to often?
Whew, what artist? I always return to it, depending on my mood. I'll return to Coltrane's Love Supreme.
Mm.
I actually structured my first book, Exodus, on pursuance. It's structured, it's based on Coltrane's pursuance. And then in Begin Again, I actually interpret Baldwin at the end in the last chapter through Coltrane's pursuance as well. So it's always in my head.
Acknowledgments is one of my favorite.
Exactly, Doc. Exactly. Yeah.
So good. I'll let Henry finish up with the last question for
I only got one more. The politics of our future should be defined by what, if you could do it in 3 words?
The politics of our future should be defined by what? Our love of people.
you. Mm.
Our
Well,
love of people. Not of money, not of power, not of status, but of people. Everyday people.
Like that.
well, on that note, Dr. Glaude, we appreciate you for spending your time with us as everyday people. Once again, please be sure to get his latest book, America USA: How Race Shadows the Nation's Anniversaries. Dr. Glaude, for us, for our listeners, for everyone who's going to watch, we not only thank you for your time, but if there's anything that you have coming up, if you're doing any book tours or any talks, or if you want to promote a native son, you have the floor to do and promote whatever you're doing, because I know you
I
have.
just want folk to continue to push this podcast forward, to get friends to come subscribe, do all the stuff that they need to do in order for this platform to grow even bigger. And I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to sit down and chop it up with you.
Well,
Uh,
thank you.
it's been a blessing.
Indeed.